straight-A high school girl who comes from a tight-knit family in Phoenix, Arizona. One night, Debbie's friend Bianca calls her and tells her that she's in her driveway and wants Debbie to come down and say hello. Debbie goes outside and she finds Bianca in a Cadillac with two older men. Debbie goes to give Bianca a hug and Bianca pulls her into the car. One of the men hold a gun to Debbie's head while they yell at Bianca to tape up Debbie's hands, mouth, and eyes. Debbie is then drugged and taken to an apartment where she is gang raped and then put to live in a dog cage. She is forced to have sex with multiple men, making hundreds of dollars per night, all the money going to her captor. Debbie is the last person most of us would expect to be forced into the world of sex trafficking. But Debbie is only one of the thousands of people in the U.S. who are lured or abducted from their normal lives and made into sex slaves. Today I'm going to tell you about the most common form of slavery that even goes on in our own country today, and that is human trafficking. So what is human trafficking? Human trafficking is any commercial sex act or labor induced by force, fraud, or coercion. So force, fraud, and coercion are basically what make up a trafficking case. Force involves any physical restraint, beatings, or rape against another person. Fraud involves any false promises or posing as a false company or service job. And coercion involves any threats or blackmail, confiscation of passport, or making a person afraid to seek help. All trafficking is exploitive, and exploitation, what that means is to take advantage of one's vulnerabilities. Under U.S. law, if someone is being used for commercial sex and they are under 18, which means that they are a child, then force, fraud, and coercion do not need to be proven in court, though they are usually present. If they are above 18, those three things do need to be proven. So victims, pretty much anyone can be a victim. Men make up a really small percentage. Women and children really are what make up a big percentage of victims, especially in the U.S. 41% of trafficking cases actually reference U.S. citizens as victims. Women are often lured with offers of legitimate work as shop assistants or waitresses, and they are usually promised marriage or education from their trafficker. They make up 85% of sex trafficking cases, and they're usually vulnerable to STDs, HIV, unwanted pregnancy, and others. Children, this includes boys and girls. There are between 100,000 to 300,000 child victims in the U.S. alone. Usually they're runaways or abandoned children, and oftentimes they are living on the street. A common theme among child victims are neglected parents, parental drug use, poverty, and abuse. Often victims are broken in before they are sold to clients, which means that they're brutally raped by their captor before they're sold. And then there's many effects on victims. Two of the most common are PTSD and suicidal thoughts. Often they lead to the victim turning to drugs and alcohol to cope. So there are different types of traffickers. Probably the main one that goes on here in the U.S. are pimps. And what a pimp is someone who controls prostitutes and arranges clients for them, taking most of their earnings in return. Victims are often expected to earn $500 to $1,000 or more per night, and usually all that money goes to the pimp. And something that's surprising to most people is that women can also be traffickers. They actually make up 35 to 40% of traffickers, and this most often occurs in family-controlled trafficking situation. So, like for example, there might be a single mom who is just really struggling to make ends meet, and she might actually tell the child that the child needs to help the family make money, and she might actually allow her child to be sold into trafficking in order to make money for the family. So as far as buyers go, there's no typical profile that encapsulates a typical client, but a very common theme that has been found among people who buy are married men who have kids and usually buy in lieu of abusing their own children. So where does this happen? In the U.S., it happens at all these kinds of places, but probably the top two are the internet and sporting events. The internet really widened the playing field for sex trafficking to go on here in the U.S., because basically what happens is traffickers will go onto sites such as Craigslist, and they'll actually list the people that they're selling, and buyers can go on there and find these people, and it's just, they're basically selling people as objects on the internet. And then sporting events, something that's really huge in the U.S. is the Super Bowl, as we all know, and traffickers really target that one event. There's a lot of trafficking cases reported during the Super Bowl, and it's basically because there's just thousands and thousands of men going to one stadium to watch this game, and traffickers go there and really target the men at that game. So this is a map of the U.S. and it has all the locations of potential human trafficking cases that were reported, and this was from 2007 to 2012. Where the red is where the most have been reported. So as you can see, there's obviously a lot of color on this map. It's clearly happening here, especially along the East Coast near us. There's a lot of red. So it's happening in our own backyard, and something needs to be done to stop it. So how is this being prevented in the U.S.? In 2000, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act was passed, and basically what that does is it just strengthens the U.S. zero tolerance policy against human trafficking. And though this is enforced, it is oftentimes true that government officials and some police forces may actually be involved in trafficking themselves. So I'm going to tell you about one of the many organizations that's against human trafficking, and this is called Love 146. And they're really great. They provide a number of things. The first thing they do is they provide survivor care. And what they do is they help victims get back on their feet. They'll help them find a job, find a home, and they'll also provide counseling and therapy for victims. They also provide prevention education around the U.S. So what they do is they go into high schools and other facilities in the U.S. and they teach people, they just raise awareness and teach people about trafficking and how to prevent it in their area and how to keep themselves safe. And something really cool that's really easy to get involved with are task forces. And what task forces are just different locations around the U.S. who volunteer to pair up with Love 146. And they meet once a month and they talk about how they can prevent trafficking in their area and how they can raise awareness. One around us that's actually really easy to get involved with is at Blue Root Vineyard Church in Media, PA. And theirs is called Braveheart, and they meet the first Sunday every month after their 11 a.m. service. And the meetings usually go from like 1 to 3, and they talk about how they can prevent trafficking in their area and raise awareness. So I know upon hearing this information, it really saddened me, and it just really made me want to do something. Martin Luther King once said that justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. I think in the U.S. we often think of slavery as something that's been abolished, and clearly it still goes on. So being students at a school that stands for faith, reason, and justice, I really call you guys to take a stand against this current injustice that's going on in our own backyards and to join the modern day abolition movement.